Meanwhile, the government remains confident that India can manage its crude oil and energy requirements even as tensions in the Middle East continue. One key reason behind this confidence has been the steady flow of discounted Russian crude that has helped India maintain its supplies. But fresh reports now suggest that this trend may be changing. Now, maps tracking the global oil tankers, let's put that up on the screen for you, movement, indicate a large share of Russian crude shipments no longer headed towards India. You see those red dots over there? Not headed towards India. Instead, many of these tankers are being diverted to other Asian buyers, particularly China. In fact, the map on your screens right now shows very limited tanker activity along the Indian coast, while significant number of oil shipments appear moving towards the Chinese ports. Why is that happening? Is there a sort of surge pricing that is taking place of oil at the moment? Is the world bidding for oil right now? I have with me somebody who understands this right to the core. Siddharth Zarabi joins us now for the very latest. Siddharth, thank you so much for being here. We had a long discussion this afternoon trying to decipher how to make sense of what's happening. And you said something that really stuck with me. You said, this is the Uberization of oil. Explain that.
Well, frankly, this war could also be called an oil prices war. At the core of it, what is Iran doing? Iran is trying to make sure that consumers across the world, including in the United States, pay the price for the attack on them. And that is now rippling through the entire energy ecosystem. And this energy ecosystem, as you can see from some of these details which we have right here up on the screen, there's been massive volatility. $120, and that then getting corrected because one big detail and piece of information that came up. But look at this situation. A doubling of crude oil prices since the beginning of the year. Who could have imagined a scenario like this? And that has a cascading impact, $120 to the barrel. This was after that attack on Iranian storage, which has compounded matters because it's not just about the free flow of oil that is stuck on ships and tankers and Hormuz Strait where no one is going through, because it all started with insurance getting blocked off. And as we move along, we'll try and capture the point that you made, Sonal, which is what is then happening. There's been a recovery because in minutes from now, we will have the G7 meeting, and this is the group of 7 countries, which will meet to decide and possibly release between 300 to 400 million barrels, and that will go into the market, and that having an immediate impact on spot prices corrected to by almost $12 and in fact a bit more. And it's been a bit of a yo-yo in the last several hours. So we will see how this settles down. But that one big announcement is what will the G7 do to release oil from their reserves. The second bit, which is on your screen, and this is Saudi Aramco, which is one of the largest oil producers in the world, in fact, the largest, is now doing something that is very rare, which is to offer oil on the spot market through tenders. And these two factors, reason 1 and reason 2, could come to the rescue of what is clearly the biggest oil price shock that the world has seen in living memory. And this would have subsequent effect, downstream impact, possibly on fertilizer prices, on metals pricing, because the entire fuel ecosystem is feedstock for that entire process. So the Saudis, what they are doing and what the G7 will, of course, will make a difference. And finally, on the point that you made about surge pricing, it was around 4 days back when we first at Business Today reported that Russian oil was back on tap after that so-called waiver that the United States decided to offer on its own. We've still been purchasing, so I don't know what that waiver was, but what it meant was that more quantity of Russian oil was available for India, but no longer at discounted prices. And what we have seen in the past few hours is a 26% jump in Urals crude from Russia. And that's because everybody is scrambling, and China, which is one of the largest buyers, is scrambling to stock up even more than it has because its energy uses are amongst the highest in the world. So a lot of flux as far as the oil prices are concerned. And I think between the G7, Saudi Arabia, and what the government of India is doing to enhance supplies at this stage will perhaps have a calming effect. But clearly, this is going to be a space that will be watched in the days ahead. So,
right. So that if I can quickly ask you one more thing. How, it's quite fascinating when you try to understand how this bidding war for oil is actually going on. Is there a forum where it happens? How exactly do countries decide? How are they hoarding? China, for example, you say that is, still has the largest reserve perhaps possible, but it's still buying more. India, in the parliament, we heard there by the minister saying that we have about 74 days of reserves with us. So, Japan this morning, if I'm not wrong, started dipping into its reserves just today. They have about 300 days of oil with them. So how exactly is this war going on the seas and this entire Uberization process then?
This is a complex time in the world energy market. Remember, Russian oil has been sanctioned and a lot of Russian oil that is flowing out, particularly into China, is through sources that are not perhaps very clear-cut. It's not black and white. Many of these tankers that carry a massive amount of oil every day have different flags and they don't declare what their destination is or what is the origin of their crude. So there's a shadow market as far as Russian crude is concerned. But there are other factors at play in this very, very toxic mix, really. Venezuelan crude is coming back, and at some point, Sonal, and it will happen, Iranian Farsi sweet crude will also come into the mix. So there is going to be short-term volatility. And remember, India's sources of crude oil are more than Russian oil itself. And I think that strategy is going to pay off in the days ahead. But in the short term, prices are going to pinch.
All right, Siddharth, we'll leave it there for the moment. Thank you so much for explaining all of that so simply for our viewers also to try and understand. And like Siddharth said, this is not just the war of a particular country. It is the war of oil prices.